Amy, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
So we've been looking for this conversation forward to this conversation for quite some time, in that you hit on the National Science Foundation, which we'll talk a little bit about, AI, the weather, and trust. So this is a pretty dense conversation. Let's go to the top of that list and start with trust. You began something called the National Science Foundation's Institute for Research on Trustworthy AI in Weather, Climate, and Coastal Oceanography. A bit of a mouthful. Tell me about why trust figures into this so importantly.
So the long name, by the way, was created by NSF. When the original AI Institute calls came out, there were a bunch of themes on the different questions that they wanted to research. And for us, because we're doing AI for weather, we're very interested in the concept of how people would trust the AI or not trust the AI, because you're using an AI to help you make life or death decisions. So the concept of trust was really central to everything we were trying to do to the AI. We don't just want to develop AI and throw it over the fence.
So how did you know from the get-go that that was an issue? Would people trust material, and would they even know it was AI driven? So your determination that what you were doing needed to resonate with, let's presume, the public, and that trust was such a crucial issue.
So we're actually looking at professional end users right now, which is part of how they know that it's AI, right? The public doesn't necessarily know if it's AI on their phone. They just get a weather forecast, and do they trust it or do they not? But the professional end users know what kinds of models they're looking at, and they need to know whether or not they trust the model and what about the model is trustworthy or not. And that's another question, right? If you're giving it AI and AI doesn't, for example, know the laws of physics, what might make you trust that AI model versus what will make you not trust that AI model?
And so for the professionals, as they observe the trend using AI and the work that you and others do, their concerns about trustworthiness is based on what they have observed in these reports, and they can see that, hey, that was inaccurate information. And so therefore you're getting that kind of feedback, or what else caused them to want you to respond in this way, for you to make sure that what they were getting from you was formatted and produced in a particular manner?
So we're doing interviews with our end users so that we can actually understand why they trust it and why they don't, right? So we're not just observing them, we're actually having them interact with the products and doing, so the AI2ES, which is the short version of our name, we have AI researchers working hand in hand with meteorologists and ocean scientists, and then risk communication specialists who are social scientists. And they're the ones who are doing the interviews, right? And they're observing our professional end users actually use the products and see what they like about them and what they don't like about them, and giving us feedback. We're doing open-ended, structured interviews where they're asking questions and saying, what do you think about this? What do you like about this? So they're doing think aloud. And that helps us get the answers you're asking, right? Because it's not just sitting back and watching somebody use the product and saying, oh, how was that work?
Great. So it's interesting to talk about weather right now and weather forecasting, in that we have seen, and it's in the news, reductions in the people who are in agencies and working on these kinds of topics. Having lived in the Gulf, it's hurricane season now, as of the 1st of June, and there's concerns about that. Talk about weather forecasting and how it has evolved, because I think people had pretty good confidence in what they're seeing. Occasionally, it's misaligned with what's really happening. But let's just talk about forecasting generally and how it's improved recently.
In forecasting generally is really good. And by the way, although there are cuts to a lot of the agencies, there's an act right now to restore a whole bunch of the funding to the Weather Service to make sure that the Weather Service employees can be caught back up, because they are very behind. If you're asking a general forecasting question over the last 10, 15 years, weather forecasting has improved dramatically. Our hurricane forecasting is really quite good with and without AI. The models that predict where a hurricane is going to land can tell you many days out within a very small number of miles where it's going to land.
Right.
I mean, those are very large impacts that we are amazing at. Things like telling you when there's going to be a heat wave, we're pretty good at telling you that in advance. The smaller scale phenomena like tornadoes are harder to say precisely where there's going to be a tornado. Something like, I would like to tell you that there's going to be a tornado a day in advance, but I can only tell you the general region multiple days in advance that there will be tornadoes. But I can't tell you there'll be a tornado going down your street until about 15 minutes in advance. And even then, we might be wrong, because they're still really hard phenomena. But that has also gotten better in the last 15 to 20 years. That one in particular has gotten better because of the Doppler weather radar system, which is a nationwide system of weather radars that helps cover the U.S. and something that we need to pay attention to with our funding because we need to keep that weather system up.
For a lay audience, and again, for someone who watched hurricanes travel from the western coast of Africa across the Atlantic, making their way towards the Gulf of Mexico and New Orleans, where I lived, the understanding of those paths, and we saw all kinds of different models we would see all kinds of different models on the television screen. And you're right, the accuracy of landfall is remarkable. Explain for our audience tornadoes, which can give the appearance of showing up out of nowhere. What is being measured in the atmosphere that lets you know the high likelihood of tornadoes in an area is the result of what? Because they're a little more abstract in what they are and how they appear.
It's funny, I don't think of tornadoes as abstract. They're just smaller.
Well, there you go. But
to me, the reason the hurricanes are easier to predict is because they are very large scale events. They're something you can see from space,
right?
They're a huge weather system, and it moves, yes, from Africa over to the Gulf, but it's still a enormous low pressure system that you're tracking. And sometimes we have trouble predicting how quickly it's going to intensify, especially with the recent ocean warming, but it's still a large system. The issue with tornadoes is that there's a lot of factors that need to come together at a much smaller scale. So at the large scale, you can say things like the jet stream's doing this. You've got the low pressure systems. There's a dry line which is for the lay people is the area of much drier air. So the Gulf moisture needs to be one of the ingredients. It's coming up into the plains, and then you need a trigger. And that trigger is often the dry line, which is coming off the mountains where it's very dry air, and the two of them are meeting. Those larger scale phenomena you can predict and observe, but the actual ingredients that makes it not just a thunderstorm but a tornado is much harder, and we just don't have the complete knowledge of exactly what's going to turn. Why one storm that looks beautiful and looks like it's going to drop a tornado doesn't, and why the other one that looks beautiful and looks like it's going to drop a tornado does. Right. And that's why it's harder to say so far in advance, oh, you're going to have a tornado coming down this street. Whereas you can say, well, the ingredients are going to come together in Oklahoma.
Right. And that's maybe the word abstract is probably the wrong word, but you just described the phenomena as I understand it, which gives it this sense of could happen, should happen, might happen, and obviously more difficult to predict with the kind of precision that you could with a hurricane. So add AI into this and how it should be helping us, I would think, with regard to all this work and data collection and synthesizing that data. So talk about how AI has come into your work and what we should expect from that.
It's an excellent question. So AI for weather has been around for a while. I've been involved in AI for weather for over 20 years. And I like to, when people ask me, oh, did you just start doing AI? I'm like, no, I've been doing AI since before AI was cool. So there are a lot of ways in which AI can be used. And, 20 years ago, the traditional way to do AI was to take what we know as numerical weather prediction models, which are the physics-based models, and put the AI on top of it. So we post-process it because all of the models, the saying is all models are wrong. Some of them are useful. So we're trying to post-process it and try to fix some of the things that are wrong. Nowadays, they're starting to look at just a pure AI approach. And what that means, what you're seeing in the news, when you're seeing articles in the big, Google did this or Microsoft did this, what you're seeing is these more global scale models where they train on 40 or 50 years of data, no laws of physics, just 40 or 50 years of data, of historical data over the entire globe. And they learn how to mimic the next few time steps, given the last few time steps. And this is sort of the new breed of AI models, and that's what's looking at. I mean, that you've seen some in the news about them being able to track hurricanes or predict hurricanes well, again because they're large scale phenomena. But they're doing really well at doing temperature and things like that out to a certain number of days. Where are we looking for the future for those? Those are still not doing the small scale phenomena yet, like we talked about tornadoes. They're also really only going out to about 7 to 10 days, which is where we're at right now with the physics based models. Here's the excitement that I think is going to come sometime soon. There's an annual conference called the American Meteorological Society, and they have an annual meeting. There's like 27 conferences that all meet together, and they call it the annual meeting. There was a talk last year at the annual meeting, not by me, by a professor at the University of Washington, but it was really cool, talking about how if you knew the answer to what the weather phenomenon was, how far back in advance could the AI model have predicted it? So it's an if statement. But what he was able to show is that you could break the predictability barrier that we currently have in physics-based models, which is around 2 weeks. back to about 28 days. Now, how do you do that when you don't know what the answer is yet? That's unknown yet. But the excitement out of that is that I think that AI is going to lead us to be able to get some of these forecasts more predictable farther in the future. And farther in the future is good because it means we can save more lives. We can give more warning to lots of things. In a drought 3 weeks in advance, you can take better preparation than if you're about to be in a drought 2 days in advance.
It's been brought up as we've been talking with our friends in the insurance industry, which is related to the things we're talking about right now. Excuse me. It's interesting that we've been talking to friends in the insurance industry, which is somewhat related to what we're talking about now. And looking at retrospective data doesn't give you the information you need to really measure risk and thus the insurance that go with it, because cycles have changed. Climate change has changed that data. For what you're describing, going back, as you mentioned, 50 years, for the phenomena you're looking at, how rapidly is the data changing relative to what it was back then? And how is that retrospective look helping?
It's a good question. These large-scale AI models need a tremendous amount of data, and some of the fundamental things, if you view it as it's learning the physics from looking at 40 and 50 years of data, physics hasn't changed. What's changed is the distributions, right? We haven't broken physics. We've just made the world warmer. So if it's learning the physics, then that isn't going to change. But if you're trying to predict these extreme events, then what you're seeing is people trying to focus in on predicting using the last few years of data, because you're right, the distributions have shifted. We are a warming world. If I'm going to try to predict an extreme temperature event, it's much more likely that I'm going to get an extreme heat event now than it was 15 years ago.
So you mentioned also the fact that prediction, which matters a lot, for example, with hurricanes, that some of the funding apparently has been restored to bring back the people who are needed to do that work. And with regard to hurricanes, we're talking about the planes, we're talking about the weather balloons, as we often are in other areas as well. But a whole lot of people coming together to do that work. What prompted the restoration of some of that funding to put back in place? And even though I think you already said some now data is missing as a result of what we did, but putting that back together, what prompted that?
I'm not at that level in the government. My hearing of what I've read in the news is that what was prompted is people talking about it, people calling their representatives and their congressmen, people telling them we need these weather forecasts, because weather underlies everything we do. There was actually a study that showed up in the news recently that talked about the fact that 90% of people in the United States use federally funded data on a daily basis, and 10% of them know that they're doing it. And you know what that data was? It was weather. It was weather, because your weather underlies every decision you're going to do. What do you wear today? What are you going to get? Do you take an umbrella? Those are simple decisions. But if you're a farmer, do I plant? When do I plant? Do I need to protect my livestock because we're about to get a hailstorm? And if you're in industry, do I move all my planes somewhere because there's about to be a hailstorm? Right. Weather underlies everything we do, and cutting the ability to forecast weather is going to be detrimental to our economy.
So, like other things around healthcare, I think we're seeing a bit of the same.
Yes.
If it feels like it's going to impact me, my family, my community, my congressman, my senator is going to hear about it, or others. Right. And so that makes change. So that makes perfect sense. It's just interesting to see how these things happen. The role of the private sector in this, getting into the weather business, so to speak, and you would know much more about this than I ever will, but talk about private sector entrance into something that they thought, as you just pointed out, was something that was done for me by the government. That's something owned by all of us. The role of the private sector in weather prediction.
It's an interesting question. For a long time, it was a very small number of private sector entities that were doing some value added. So what the government does is the government provides the model data, and it provides it available for everybody for free, right? They're giving you a forecast. If all you care about is the temperature today, you're done. You probably don't need these weather companies. The weather companies are doing the value added on top of that. They're giving you, forecasts for your airplane company about turbulence. They're giving you forecasts for agriculture. I know there's a lot of weather companies that are doing agricultural forecasts, right? They're putting the value on top of it that the government forecasters are not able to do, because that's not what their job is. Their job is to provide the fundamental forecast. The most recent entries are people who are working on AI weather models, right? And it's been recently a lot of large companies, although I'm involved in the startup, but there's been a lot of large companies who are putting their large amount of computing power behind this to generate models. They're still relying on the government data, by the way. All of this data they're training on is government data. A lot of them are still using the government models to post-process, to as input, because they're the best that we have, and they're freely available for everybody.
Hmm.
The other thing I would say that I don't think a lot of people realize, and this is part of why I think 10% of people realize they were using government data. The government doesn't have an app for weather forecasting. And so they're getting the data, but it's being ingested by these private companies that are giving you an app.
Interesting. So tell us about your entry into this Brightband and what it does in this ecosystem of government players, private sector players, what's needed to be done. Tell us how Brightband came about.
Well, so I am an advisor to Brightband and a consultant.
Okay.
Brightband is a public good company. So this is something new that I learned about with Brightband. It's not just another Google just out there to make money. They're actually out there to try to do something for the public good, although they still are a public company. Well, private now, but a company that's trying to make money. But their goal is to democratize the weather access for all, and to try to develop things that they can help people everywhere. So we're developing a really cool system that is ingesting all of the weather data that's available everywhere, that we're giving you a much more consistent view. And then it's going to be processed by AI. And then we're doing from that a fully AI weather forecasting system, which is something that's different, right? Because the current models do something called data assimilation to read in all those data sets that I just talked about we were reading in. And data assimilation is very computationally intensive, and it takes a long time. So as every time you get in a new observation, it takes you hours to be able to get you everything back out into the weather models, because it takes a while to do the data assimilation. You got to put it in the physics-based model and put it back out. And our goal is to do all that with AI, be able to take the models in quickly, take all the data, all the observations, and be able to update the models very quickly going back and forward. I'm also involved. The project I'm involved in there is on verification as well, which I'm happy to talk about because I'm excited by it.
Well, if you're excited by something and you want to talk about it, please do.
So the project I'm involved in is called Extreme Weather Inch, and the idea for that is that people care about the weather in the extremes that are hitting them, right? And what's happening with these new weather models that are getting out there is that people are saying, oh, well, it did this hurricane really well. It did this hurricane really well. But they're not comparing apples to apples and oranges and all of that. They're really comparing, just cherry picking examples. And there isn't a way out there right now. There's a weather bench out there, but it's looking more at the global weather. How well did you do on the temperature? It's not looking at these high impact events that hit people. And that's what we're trying to build on, is try to be able to let people see, well, this is how well this model would work on hurricanes, on heat waves, on cold spells, on severe weather. So that you could really compare the models and see how well it would work for what you care about. It's going to be something we release open source. So I'm excited.
Great. And presumably there's an app for that, unlike a government app. And so I will be able to use this?
Well, it's not a forecasting. It's more of a retrospective right now, right? It'll tell you how well the models would work. So I would say there'll be a website for that.
Okay.
It's not something we're selling.
Okay. Got it. Why are, and it's probably an obvious answer, some of the big players, the Googles, NVIDIAs, and others, why are they playing around in this space? And apparently with some very good results using AI. What would be their interest in this?
You know, I was a faculty consultant at Google for 3 years, and I actually don't know what their monetary game is on weather. I know that they have ideas on it, but I don't have any insight into what the upper administration thinks about it. As far as I can tell, it's more clicks, and more clicks equals more money. NVIDIA, what I've heard is that the person who's leading the effort at NVIDIA really strongly cares about climate and wants to be able to improve our climate resilience and also sell more GPUs. But you know, that's their business model. But I mean, I don't have a complete deep understanding of that, right? Because if I knew this is exactly how they were going to turn around and get more money, then all of us would probably make that weather company.
Right. Which, by the way, would be a definition of a lot of research, right? Let's get into it, and what might be very useful in the public realm will emerge, but you have to be in the game to cause that to happen. So that's it. Interesting that someone as close to it as you are, wouldn't have an immediate answer to that. So it's just fascinating to see those companies involved. And presumably with the capacity of computing power, AI, scenario building, and I think about this with digital twins and cities, which is an area that I'm more familiar with, the ability to scenario plan around things that you might build or what would happen if a hurricane would come to your town or something like that is really useful.
Yes.
I think we've already touched on this, but go into how I might use this effectively using the term scenario planning, how I could do that with weather that would you think would make sense.
For the AI weather models, I think that's a really good question, right? So one of the things we didn't talk about was the computational difference between the AI weather models and the numerical weather prediction models. So if I want to do scenario planning, I want to do a what if game, and I want to be able to run what if on 1,000 different permutations. A numerical weather prediction model, the current models that are physics-based, are very computationally intensive. I'm never going to get 1,000 of them done on any reasonable supercomputer in any reasonable amount of time. You're just not going to, you don't have enough time. The AI weather models are expensive to train, but to run them is very, very quick. It's just matrix multiplication forward. You can do it on your GPU. You could do it on your laptop once it's a trained model. Assuming it's a small enough model to fit on your laptop. Anyway, it would still fit on a decent sized GPU. And so you could do this scenario planning really quickly. I could say, well, give it a different initial conditions. What if the hurricane hits here? What if the hurricane hits here? What if it rains this much in this amount of time? What happens to my city? And I could do that, and I could get 1,000 different answers, and I could probably ask all the different questions about the uncertainties. And I think that that's really huge and powerful.
So you would like to believe, if you have that capacity at your fingertips or on your laptop, that the planning that cities could do in anticipation of very likely events could allow them to adapt to these new conditions, to prepare for these new conditions. You'd like to believe that would have a positive impact on saving lives, keeping communities intact. Are you seeing people taking advantage of this in those ways? In other words, is resiliency being increased as a result of the tools that you and others are helping to build?
I think it's coming. Part of the issue is you can't do the resiliency at the level you're asking, which is like city planning, doesn't exist yet in the AI models, right? Because they're doing these larger scale questions. So we can look at the questions of what if this heat wave, how intense is it going to be, but it's going to be over a large region. The question of how much rain is going to hit this city right now isn't yet in the resolution of these pure AI models, but it's coming. And so I think the answer to your question is in the next few years, you're going to be seeing it. You just don't see it yet because it's not a capability that's there yet.
But knowing, let's take Houston, that 100-year rain events appear to be happening on a far more frequent basis than 100 years. So that's measurable. We've seen that. Are the tools that you're building, again, maybe I'm asking the same question in a slightly different way, is your ability to see what's coming, short-term and longer-term, causing people to sit and take notice in a more urgent manner to do some of the things that I was describing, do you think?
I think it is. I think people are in meetings with a lot of the companies, including Brightband, to ask about these questions, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're asking if it's deployed in the cities, I am unaware of it being deployed yet. I do know of one that got deployed early that was claiming to do earthquake resiliency. Earthquakes, by the way, are really hard to predict.
Yeah.
And that should just be the answer to what happened with that one. The questions about what if on rain events are a little bit more doable. I saw another really good talk you're asking these like city level questions. There's another one that's coming. I saw another talk. This one's work by somebody at NCAR, National Center for Atmospheric Research, talking about doing wind planning at the like meter level, like around buildings in large cities. And that will be a place where the physics-based simulation that she was looking at took a week to run an hour of wind in the city. Now imagine you can do that in 2 minutes in AI, right? That's what they were working on. So 5 years from now, you will be able to do that. You'll be able to say, well, what happens when this hurricane hits? What's all the damage I'm going to see on the wind? Where's the issues with the rain? Where is it going to flood? Because you're going to have these super high resolution elevation models. You're going to be able to tell all of that.
Right.
What you're seeing now is the pieces of those. They just haven't, that I am aware of, haven't come together in a model that you could go by.
Yeah, and I was thinking less about the actual deployment in the city, which sounds like that's coming, and I think everybody imagines that. It was more the heightened awareness of what's happening, and we will be able to take advantage of tools when they arrive, but already knowing what we know and what we've seen the past couple of decades in the increase in the costs of managing disasters in cities, that you'd like to believe there's a heightened preparedness, a heightened willingness to be prepared based on what you and others are doing.
I think that's true. I mean, using our Texas example, we have one of the partners in AI2, two of our partners in AI2S are in Texas, South Texas, specifically. They're in Corpus Christi. And so using some examples down there, we've got AI models that are predicting fog events in Corpus Christi, because that's the third most trafficked bay in the United States. And they need to be able to predict the fog. And then the other one is cold stunning events. So when it doesn't get cold in South Texas very much. when it does get cold in South Texas, it has these things called cold stunnings that kill the turtles. It basically stuns the turtles into this hypothermic, they can't do anything. Hypothermic, not hyper. I'll get my words right on that. But the turtles, when they become hypothermic, they need to be rescued or else they get run over by the boats. We have an AI model. We have a relationship with the stakeholders to be able to cancel and hold everybody outside the bay in these major events. And you're asking about willingness. They're very happy to work with us on the AI models. They understand the need for doing this, and they're happy to see the improvements over time with them as well. So I think that engagement is there. It's just there on the individual city levels on the different problems that are engaging that city. So those are examples in Corpus Christi, Texas.
So here's a slightly adjacent question,
Okay.
Which we've heard about, and it's going to be one of our next podcasts. We all understand, especially in the region where I am, a lot of data centers are being built, and with them come to higher demands for water and energy, which you would be very familiar with. So how do you calculate that, so to speak? That's probably the wrong word, but just reconcile what that takes to generate the information that you would like to see through the work that you're doing as a background thought. I'm sure you and your peers talk about what it takes to actually achieve some of the results you'd like to see.
We do talk about it. We don't, the question of sustainability is one that I care deeply about and don't have a solution to myself because it's sort of beyond the scale at which one faculty can work.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, and that's why I said this is a slightly unfair adjacent question, but I think any of us who are being prompted, funny word to use these tools, because they can be very effective for things that we're trying to achieve, knowing that, wait a minute, some of the things we're trying to achieve are about sustainability and reduced energy costs and reduced water usage. So there's a certain irony, at the very least, in the availability of these tools.
Yes, and we try to talk about it, but as I said, we don't have individual faculty can't make a new supercomputer that's sustainable, but we can talk about it in the way of teaching about it in our practices and making sure that you're not running 10 million experiments when 10 would do, try to be sustainable about the way you're creating the models, and trying to aim for something that will run on a laptop is a lot more sustainable than requiring a model that's going to require a whole supercomputer for you to run. It's also a more democratic answer. Because you were talking about democratizing the weather, right? Not everyone has a supercomputer. In fact, I'll give you an example of that's actually just kind of ironic. One of our first models that we deployed over to NOAA, we had funding to give it to NOAA. We had developed it without thinking about the resources in mind because we have a supercomputer at the university, right? We handed it to them, and it's running on a single desktop computer. And it took an hour to give them results that they needed in 2 minutes, right? So we had to take it back and say, hang on a second, retool the model, come back. Now it runs in about 30 seconds, which is great. But it was just a lesson in, wait a minute, not everybody has those resources, right? And now they can use it because now it's doing what they need in a sustainable manner. And I think that's what we need to be doing as faculty and everybody. We need to just be telling people, develop it for the resources, develop the model you need, not the model that's gigantic, that has 10 million billion parameters. Develop the model for the task you need that will run on the resources you need.
So to bring this to closure, and by the way, your answers are just wonderful in the way that they open up vistas of thinking about these issues in ways that I haven't. Your institute, the kind of things that are coming out of the federal government at the moment, that seems not to value, I would say, data-driven science the way we should in this country, especially when you're talking about something that should benefit the greater good, like our ability to understand the weather better. So how is your institute doing in the face of some budget reductions, and how do you see things moving forward in the future?
So we are one of the original institutes that was funded actually during the first Trump administration. So we were funded in 2020. We had 5 years of funding, and if you do the math, this is year 5. So the answer to how we are doing going forward is we are under renewal right now. I don't have an answer because we are waiting for the answer to our renewal eagerly. We do have a no-cost extension, so we have another year to spend out our remaining money. So we have another year of work. Beyond that, my best hope is that we get renewed.
Maybe we back the question up, not just about you and your institute, but general, the sector that you're operating in. And I'm not trying to get excessively political here, but the importance of your work and how this country and the models that has built around weather forecasting prediction are as good as any others out there, if not better than most. Our position in the sciences, and in this case, your kind of work, just as you're observing what's happening, commentary about that?
I think it's similar to the commentary about the initial firings with the weather forecasters. People didn't realize everything that was happening, and now there's been a lot of discussions about how important the research is. I participated in a public outreach event on that recently, and people didn't know what was happening behind the scenes, and that's partly the researchers' fault. We're not communicating necessarily to the public everything that we're doing. We've not had to in the past, but it's important that they see that you can't just take 2025 technology and stop. Because if you do, we're not going to be at the peak of our game. We're not. I mean, yes, we'll be able to predict the events about as well as we can right now, right? But to bring us back to the tornadoes as an example, tornado forecasting has gotten a lot better in the last 20 years because of the introduction of these new Doppler weather radars. But they've been working on the next phase of the radars because we've also plateaued. If you look at the the lead times on the warnings, it's plateaued. Last 10 years, it really hasn't changed. Because there's not a new technology out there to give you new information. But we're working on developing it. If we stop the development of that, we're going to just stay at that plateau. And that's, I think, the message we have to get out there is so people understand that this fundamental research needs to keep happening. So in the space of AI, in the space of sensors, in the foundational spaces of just weather in general, all of that needs to keep happening because that's how we're going to improve our forecasting for everybody.
I think we've touched on some of those issues, but let's assume, put the funding aside, and you're suggesting that improvements, innovations are on the horizon. So being very positive about this, the things that you're most excited about and or which are going to make things significantly improved, what are you most excited about in your field?
Assuming that everything comes to fruition?
Yes.
I think the personalized weather models that can come from AI, right? So that I can get a weather. It's something we sort of touched on, but not necessarily. You were asking about cities. I think the idea that in your phone, you could get a personalized forecast for you that is different than the forecast I'm going to get for me. Let's say we were even in the same city, that we have different needs, that we have, so the farmer can get a different forecast, that the person who's managing a large business, the person who's managing a small business, they all have different risk profiles, and they're going to be able to get a personalized forecast that helps them meet their needs. And I'm pretty excited about that. And it isn't just about translation or large language models or anything like that. It's about meeting the risk profiles that you put together. We'll come to the severe weather. How much risk can you tolerate of the severe weather? Well, you have a shelter in your house, you have different risks than if you don't, right? And there's also, I think there's just a lot of personalized needs. If you have somebody who needs longer to evacuate on a hurricane, then you need to get out earlier, perhaps even if the hurricane isn't sure that it's coming to your place. All of these personalized needs, I'm really excited that we can try to help more people that way.
It sounds like, but very different than the appeal of personalized medicine. But so much of that is out of my control that would give me that access to that personalized medicine. The way you're describing this is, if I set the parameters appropriately, which it sounds like I might be able to do, I will get that personalized weather forecast, which is going to be customized for, as you point out, my needs and the things that I'm trying to do or achieve.
That is my hope for the future. I agree with you on the medicine one too. I mean, the goal of personalized medicine is great, but the problem is that the insurance companies are controlling all of the personalized medicine access. I don't think that's going to be the case for weather. There's not an insurance company that's controlling your access to the weather.
Although insurance companies have extreme interest in this kind of
I am not denying that, yes. And they would also very much like the personalized risks because they would like to insure your house based on whether or not you have a very high risk of your roof, for example, getting destroyed.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Amy, it is a pleasure to speak with you, and your enthusiasm for your work comes through loud and clear. And I wish you the best with the Institute. I hope you're re-upped and the government sees the importance of your work. Obviously, the public does. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.